Dear students, hopefully all of you will be fine. Now we are in the third lecture. Actually, it is lecture number 2, but we are dividing each lecture into two parts for your convenience, because on each day, that is on Sunday, we have two classes. So I am going to divide each lecture into two parts. Now, dear students, this is we know we are going to we have gone through actually in the first lecture about the traditional way of looking at literature, analyzing literature, and then we defined literary tale, and we summed up some of its features, and then we also gave you a list of literary tales that we are going to in this module. Now, if we look at this lecture, then we will come to know that again we are a bit of revision of our first lecture, that was how we used to use traditional critical practice. And we know that in traditional criticism, this spans up to the early decades of 20th century. Literary criticism is very much biographical as well as historical. What do we mean by it? We mean by it that we choose to enter into some piece of literature through the biography of the poet. We place the piece of literature into some historical era, and then we try to analyze that piece of literature through the personality of the poet, or through the era or the features of the age. For example, when we teach Wordsworth's poem Lucy, what the teacher would do? First, the teacher would discuss the life of the poet, that is Wordsworth. Then he would place that poem into certain era, that is the Romantic era we know in English literature, and he would discuss the features, general features of this era, of this age. Then, through this historical background or through this autobiographical background, the teacher would try to explain, and all the time the teacher would try to connect the text of this poem, that is Lucy, to the features of the history, to the life of the poet. It means that again, what the teacher is doing, he is trying to explain the text of the poem through the life of the poet or through the historical age. So, focus is upon the period and the life of the poet and not upon the actual text. So that was, it means that we try to know the authorial intentions. What were the intentions of the poet when he or she was writing the poem? So our focus is more on the poet, on the history, on the age, and less on the text. Now, we have another. Dr. Johnson recorded the biographical details and views of the poets of his time in the lives of the poets to guide the critic. So, we know he is very well known critic, that is Dr. Johnson. He has a book on, famous book on his critic, that is The Lives of the Poets. So, actually what he was doing, he was trying to set the guidelines for the teachers and for the critics. That what were those guidelines? That you should enter into the text with the help of the biographies of the poets. For example, when we teach the French Revolution, that is also written by Wordsworth, then first we will give the background of French Revolution, how it took place, what were the reasons behind it, what were the slogans that were raised in this revolution. So now when the students would try to explain it, they would first tell about the poet. Then they would go into the content of the poem. And then what are the things that have been described in the poem. And in the end, they would perhaps focus upon some of the symbols or the images of the rhyme schemes, and that would be done. So this was the traditional way of looking at things that we have already discussed. So what are the characteristics of new criticism? And this is, we know, a kind of departure from the focus upon the poet or the author to the text. So new critics and formalists, we know the first theory that we are going through, and we have already mentioned in that list, that is formalist. These question the author-centric and historical-oriented critical practices. So formalists declared the practice of knowing the authorial intention as intentional fallacy. So that is the first point that we must keep in mind, as we have already been discussing, that now the paradigm was shifting from the author towards the text. And the first one, those were the formalists who believe in formalism. They believe that we should leave these author-centric and historical-oriented notions while analyzing the piece of literature. And if we believe in authorial intention, they suggested term intentional fallacy for this. They argued that the author's own view about his own literary work was just one of several views and was in no way privileged. So that was the second argument that they presented. Because when we enter into the piece of literature through author, through biographies and through history, it means that we are trying to fix the meanings of the text. And we are claiming actually that what was put into the text by the author, that is the only meaning, and those meanings are privileged. So this was challenged by formalists. What they suggested, the formalists suggested that the work should be judged by its own worth and merits, not by the intensity of the poet's feelings or its emotional effects. So what the formalists believe, they believe that we should have a standard of judging the work, judging the text, and we should have no concern with the feelings and emotion of the poet. This is known as affective fallacy. So these are the two terms that the formalists suggested. When we try to access to the intentions of the author, and we try to explain some piece of literature with the help of the glasses of the writer or the author, this is known as intentional fallacy. And when we try to enter into the text and we take text as independent entity, and we don't have any concern with the feelings and the emotions of the poet, this is known as affective fallacy. So for formalists, reading is a neutral act that takes place in historical and cultural vacuum. You may disagree with some of the notions of formalism, of course, because whenever we read, we don't read in historical and cultural vacuum. That is something idealism. That is one of the criticism of formalists, or the new criticism. They believe that reading or the reader is not affected by the age, or he or she is not affected by the biography of the poet. So it is a neutral act for them, and it takes place in isolation without any concern with historical and cultural effects. Then, in all literary forms, form is primary and content is secondary. So these were called formalists, we must keep in mind. And for formalist, form is of great significance. Content is secondary for them. Form the element that is the meaning generating source. So for them, it is not the content that generates meaning, but it is the form that is the source of meaning. That is why they are called formalists. Then a literary work has a single objective and definite meaning. Every reader taking into account specific images or other linguistic features of a poem would arrive at the same meaning. A new interpretation must reject the old one. Now this is also good solution. And this is also a bit idealistic, I believe. So there is, when there are no single meaning, how each and every writer would arrive onto a single meaning. Whatever the way, whatever the method, whatever the images, whatever the symbols that he is or she is trying to interpret according to formalists, the reader would arrive on a single meaning. And when some new reader would come and he would arrive on a different meaning, the older meaning would be automatically rejected. So the critics who focus on the text only and form are divided into two groups or schools of thought. So some are the critics who are focusing upon the text, and there were other critics who are focusing upon the form. We may divide them into other two schools of thought. One were the new critics, and the leader of these new critics was T.S. Eliot, and one of his groundbreaking work, that is Tradition and Individual Talent, that guides us towards this school of thought. The other one were the fugitive. Who were fugitive? These were the group of scholars working in University of Vanderbilt. And John Crowe Ransom, Robert Penn Warren, Alan Tate, Clint Brooks, these were the critics. And what were their contributions? Their works were an appreciation to literature. Then Brooks' work was understanding poetry. Then there was understanding fiction, understanding drama. Then Caroline Cordona and Alan Tate's book, The House of Fiction, was there. So what was their features? Their features were focus on form, close reading method that they suggested, search for order. A work is a self-sufficient object with formal elements and laws of its own. So that was their claim. They were focusing upon form, number one. They suggested close reading method that we are going to discuss in our next lecture. Then they search for order, that is the form actually. And they believe that every text is an independent entity, a self-sufficient object, and it has nothing to do with author, nothing to do with the age, nothing to do with the history. And every work has its own formal elements and its own laws, and it should be defined as such. Now, Eliot led the revolt against author-centered interpretation of a poem. He argued that a poem is an autonomous subject, a self-sufficient entity, an independent entity, and it should be judged as such. He propounded his impersonal theory of poetry, in which he asserted that poetry is not turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. So that was the definition given by Wordsworth, that it is the expression of certain emotions, natural emotion. But T.S. Eliot molded it that actually it is an escape from emotion. Personal emotions have to be changed into artistic emotions to be expressed in a poem. So it means that the poet has personal emotions, but with some process these personal emotions are converted into artistic emotions, and then finally they take a kind of form. A form of the poem. A poet's mind acts as a catalyst which gives disparate feelings, emotions, and thoughts in artistic wholes or poems, but remains absent from the product. It is just like The poet's mind works just like a catalyst. It can give impetus to the reaction. It gives speed to the reaction. It helps in the completion of reaction, but actually it can be collected at the end. It is not the active agent into this reaction. Greatness of a work of art depends upon the intensity of the poetic process, not intensity of personal emotions, because personal emotions are converted into artistic emotions. So personal emotions are of no value. Actually, the process that converts personal emotion into artistic emotions, these are of much value. Then further, T.S. Eliot believes in personal emotions can be changed into artistic emotions by using certain situations, objects, myths, or past literary texts as objective correlative. That was the term we know introduced by T.S. Eliot. And what is objective correlative? A set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula of that particular emotion. Set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula of that particular emotion, such that when the external facts which must terminate in sensory experience are given, the experience is automatically evoked. So that was something given by T.S. Eliot. Now there is another person who has some contributions in formalism or in practical criticism or in new criticism. The name of that person is I. Richards. We know him very well. He is a very well known person in modern criticism especially. He gave principles of literary criticism in 1924, and then he wrote Practical Criticism, a study of literary judgment in 1921. So what were the main notions of I. Richards' theory? He gave undergraduate students poems for evaluation without titles and authors. Again, as the new critics believe that authors are of no value, titles are of no value, actually we must focus on the text. So he experimented when he distributed some poems into his students, and the poems did not carry titles and they were anonymous. He wanted them to analyze them on the basis of their intrinsic worth rather than biographical details. So that is why he omitted the names of the authors and the titles, because he wanted to experiment whether how can we analyze the text by focusing only upon the text without considering the age and without considering the biography of the poet. He devised close reading techniques to appreciate a literary work. To solely text-oriented and single scientific meaning approach of new criticism has become irrelevant now. The method of supporting the argument with evidence of the text is used by modern theories as feminism, Marxism, New Historicism, etc. So close reading technique is their valuable contribution to literary theory. So what was actually contributed by the formalists? We know that the singularity of the meaning is no more vogue in the modern criticism. We believe in the plurality of the meaning. So it has become irrelevant to some extent. And they believe that there is only one meaning or scientific meaning. That has also become irrelevant with the passage of time, because we have so many arguments against it and so many evidences against it. The only contribution that is worth mentioning here is the method of reading suggested by the formalist, and that is called close reading technique, that has been used by us for a number of years now. And each and every student of literature especially has been using this technique while he goes through the analysis or through the process of the research. So now the paradigm has shifted from author to text. Text has become bold, important now, and later on in reader response theory we would see that this paradigm was further shifted toward the reader. So that's all from this lecture number 2. Actually This is the first part of the lecture number 2. We will go through the second part of the lecture number 2 in our next lecture. Thank you very much.